A pivotal player in a long-running Arkansas legislative scandal is headed to federal prison, and the man nicknamed Crusty Rusty has quite apparently been nicking other names. Do we know them all? Can we know where, when, and how the corruption case will end? And also, can Arkansas agriculture recover its bearings amid trade wars and wars with nature? A conversation with a retiring president of the Arkansas Farm Bureau, coming up on Arkansas Week.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us. Can bilateral trade agreements and compensatory payments offer some hope for agriculture, a multi-billion-dollar Arkansas industry that's been damaged not only by trade wars, but by nature? In a few moments, we'll go over that with the outgoing president of the Arkansas Farm Bureau. But first, the multi-million-dollar scandals that have stained the state capitol. A central figure in the scheme was sentenced this week in federal court. The latest, though surely not last development in a years-long investigation. We're joined by Doug Thompson of the Northwest Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, who's been on top of the story from the start. And Paula Casey is a former U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Arkansas. 20 years ago, Ms. Casey supervised the prosecution of a not dissimilar case involving legislators and other state officials. Doug, Ms. Casey, thanks for coming in. Doug, we'll start with you. Mr. Cranford is now headed for federal prison, but he spent an awful lot of time talking in the last year and a half or so. What do we know? Where's this thing headed?
Milton Russell Rusty Cranford is the linchpin of the whole thing. He was a lobbyist that worked for a non-profit corporation in Missouri. His employers gave him the money for bribes, and he paid the bribes. That makes him one of the very few people who knows everybody involved in this process. That made his testimony particularly valuable. Steve, if I knew where this was going and who was next, I know that's on the mind of everybody, and if I knew, I would tell you. But the simple fact, all the light I can shed on this now is that the federal government is extremely pleased with the cooperation it got out of Mr. Cranford. He's appeared before 3 different grand juries, or he's appeared 3 times before grand juries. He's met with investigators, both federal and from Arkansas state investigators, 10 different times. To give you some idea of how valuable his cooperation must have been, Mr. Cranford was charged in February of 2018 with 8 very serious corruption-related indictments, charges, counts. First of all, he got that reduced to 1 count with a maximum of 10 years. And then on top of that, despite this extensive scheme, he got it reduced down to where he only has to serve 7 of that theoretical maximum of 10 years. If the government had given
Minus
him,
time served, too, I think.
Well, yeah, he spent 22 months in the Greene County, Missouri jail. That's going to count, you know, as part of his 7-year sentence. Now, you say that, you know, 7 years is still a pretty stiff sentence, but to get it reduced from 8 counts to 1 back in July, and then at the end of that, if the government had been bamboozled and been mad at that had not been satisfied, they would not have been standing in front of that judge in Springfield, Missouri on Monday saying, yeah, Your Honor, he's earned another 3 years off of his maximum sentence. And keep in mind, this is a very extensive scheme, and to put that in perspective, one of the lawmakers accused of taking a kickback actually from Mr. Cranford, among others, but from Mr. Cranford, is serving 18-year sentence right now. Another one, and
Well, he rolled the dice.
he rolled the dice and he lost. But another man who rolled the dice and lost in an unrelated case was simply the go-between. He literally passed money along, much less was an active participant in all this. He got 6 years.
We have, at last count, and hopefully that'll be it, we have 5 former legislators implicated, or
They were active legislators at the time, most of them.
Right.
But yeah, we've got 5 lawmakers.
Couple or 3 have not been, they're still awaiting sentencing in that.
About all of them are, yeah, as a matter of fact. Well, John Woods is not, the senator. He's been sent to prison. But the public corruption aspect of this case understandably gets most of the attention. Seriously, it's the most dramatic thing. But most of the money defrauded from taxpayers, taken from people who had serious behavioral health issues. This is what the Medicaid was for: drug addiction, alcohol abuse, mental health issues and such as that. That's bad enough, but very little of the money, well no, let me rephrase that. Most of the money was not used to pay bribes. Most of the money was not used to line the pockets of the people doing this. Most of the money was used to put that company in a financial position to take over other providers, which they did. I mean, you know, the name of the company is Preferred Family Healthcare, Preferred Family Healthcare, only because Preferred Family was an unsullied nonprofit that this company took over.
Yeah. Paula Casey, this I'm tempted to quote Yogi Berra.
Okay.
Deja vu all over again?
Yeah.
In many respects, and it kind of makes you wonder if every 20 or 25 years you don't just need to have a good house cleaning to take care of it. But with respect to the sentence that Mr. Cranford got, you know, everybody wants to have a trial. If you're going to have a trial, you've got to have a witness. It needs to be a witness who knows what's going on.
Yes.
And it's nice if that's somebody further down the food chain. It's makes a more sympathetic witness. But if you're going to get somebody who knows what's going on, and you can go straight to the top, then that's where you have to go.
Your point's well taken.
And he may have pled to one count, but that doesn't mean that he got away with the others, because that can count as relevant conduct in sentencing.
Well, I was going to ask, and you literally have hands-on experience in public corruption cases, public official. It is crucial, as you just noted, that you have somebody on the inside who starts to crack, and then frankly, you start working on others. Do you want to be, I think the old expression is, do you want to be a witness or do you want to be a defendant?
There you go.
Sometimes you may be both. But.
Look, you raise an excellent point. I mean, Mr. Cranford isn't going to be the most credible witness ever put into a witness chair, but he was able to tell clearly he was able to tell investigators where to look. And frankly, I don't think that the executives who've been indicted, perhaps they would have been indicted without him, but I wonder.
Without somebody to articulate, I mean, there's only so far you can go with forensic accounting and putting all the paperwork together. Somebody has to articulate what actually happened.
But also, Ms. Casey, and I remember back 20 years ago, it wasn't just testimony, just oral testimony. There was corroborating evidence as well in terms of, well, it was what's called consensual monitoring, and there was also documents that fortify a prosecution's case.
When Senator Woods went to trial, former Senator John Woods of Springdale went to trial, I was stunned by the paper trail. Frankly, the things committed to emails, the bank records,
text
everything.
Messages.
Text messages. I mean, you could almost follow them in real time. I mean, it reminds me of the old joke, we've met Big Brother and he is us. I mean, it was an extremely impressive thing. But as you say, it always helps to have a live person saying, yes, this is the only correct interpretation. Yes, I did this.
Yeah,
as I said, you know.
I'm sorry, Dave.
No, I'm simply saying you usually don't find people who can testify to things like that at choir practice.
Bringing a case such as this, Ms. Casey, to trial from first indication of wrongdoing, first suspicions, to trial or trials, is enormously expensive and enormously time consuming.
It is.
Very much so.
Tens of thousands of taxpayer hours, IRS, FBI, whatever, and U.S.
Yes.
attorneys, of course.
Yes.
Do you, at the conclusion of a case like this, do you think that do you have the feeling that there is still some undone, or is the best the government can do?
There almost assuredly are things that are undone, because when you start an investigation, you don't know where it's going to lead, and sometimes you get enough information to let you know intuitively that somebody's done something wrong, but that didn't get you to proof beyond a reasonable doubt. You can indict somebody on a preponderance of the evidence, or probable cause, excuse me, it's
Right.
criminal, but that doesn't get you didn't get you to a verdict in a jury trial. So you need to be pretty sure of what you've got. So I'm sure that there are all kinds of things left out there that are undone. But could we go back to the sentencing issue for
You
a
bet.
moment? There's a big difference between being sentenced after trial and being sentenced when you've cooperated.
Yeah.
Because you can get a sentencing break on the indictment itself, or you can get a sentencing break on your cooperation after you've done it. And the sentencing guidelines, which used to be mandatory, are now just advisory. But most judges still look at that. And if you plead guilty, you get some consideration for acceptance of responsibility,
Which Mr. Cranford did.
which he did.
He
And
absolutely
some
did.
people didn't. And then you may get bumped up for abusing a position of trust, for example. And in large measure, the guidelines are driven, when you're talking about fraud, they're driven by the amount of money that was involved. And I don't know how that plays out in that particular case.
What
but
you have just referred to was emphasized by Judge Wimes in the Springfield
Well, then I'm feeling
sentencing
really smart.
Monday. Well, congratulations, you
Thank you.
deserve it.
Thank you.
Because what happened, Judge Wimes looked at the sentence and the proposed reduction that the government and the defense attorney looked at, and he looked Mr. Cranford in the eye as he was, and had him stand up and looked at him and said, look, you didn't just hurt yourself. You didn't just hurt the people you bribed and implicated in this. You didn't just take taxpayer money. You undermined the faith that people ought to have that their government represents them, and you made it look like their government is open to the highest bidder.
Ms. Casey, going back 20 years to the last big public corruption case that you supervised, you've spent a life in the law. Do you want to get philosophical about, you mentioned earlier these 20, 25-year cycles, it seems like. Did it shape your thinking at all about the nature of public service and the temptations therein?
I don't know that I've ever been tempted in public service, but then I've never been offered a bribe.
No, I don't mean you were, but I mean it's...
You know, the prosecutions, the investigations that we did when I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office needed to be done. You certainly don't make any friends in doing that. And I think, as Doug pointed out, there's a lot of collateral damage to everybody, to the system, and to our confidence in the system. There's a lot of collateral damage to family and to friends. It's very hard, but it needs to be done.
I would
Well,
say,
I
though,
would
the
note that during
collateral...
that last case 20 years ago, all the defendants, as I recall, all the defendants were members of the political party of the president who appointed you.
That's true.
I was just going to say that, but the collateral damage of not doing it, I think you'd agree, is so much greater.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, to let this sort of behavior go on. I mean, as I said, and when we're talking about how this company used the ill-gotten gains to basically acquire more, they were almost in a too-big-to-fail position as far as in Arkansas, as far as providing behavioral health in this
Almost
state.
50 offices, were there not, Doug?
47.
Yeah, in this one state.
And still growing. When Governor Asa Hutchinson said that after the scandal broke, that's it. We're not, we're pulling their Medicaid contracts. That was not the simple decision it appeared to be. It was going to leave a huge gap. And the other behavioral health providers who rushed in and filled that gap, and the state folks who coordinated, are to be commended. Certainly it wasn't flawlessly done, but it was a huge task that took some planning before the governor ever made that announcement.
I have to wrap it up because we're out of time. Paula Casey, Doug Thompson, thanks very much for being part of the program. And we'll be right back. Arkansas Farm Bureau will have a new president next month. Randy Veach deciding to step aside after almost a dozen years at the top of the organization. Randy Veach, thanks very much for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
You have had, it's been an interesting tenure, and something, maybe the last couple of years anyway, have been particularly interesting. Well, let's start this way. The state of Arkansas agriculture, which is, I guess, American agriculture writ small, or smaller.
Yeah, but all of agriculture is pretty large. You know, it's a big issue with agriculture. When agriculture's in trouble, then everybody's going to suffer. You know, it's the largest industry in our state, in Arkansas. Over 21 billion bringing to the state's economy every year, and it's the same way all across the nation. Maybe right up in the far northeast of our country, maybe not quite as much, but pretty well everywhere else in the nation, you're going to find that each and every state's agriculture's largest industry in that state, and it's a huge economic engine, and not only in Arkansas but around our whole nation, and it's the only industry that has a trade surplus.
Well, that surplus has been reduced in recent months anyway by, of course, the dispute over trade and tariffs. Do you see, now there are some bilateral agreements, South Korea, I think, and some others. Is there light at the end of that tunnel?
We are moving forward with, we redid the USMC, the chorus agreement with South Korea. That was a big help that we got that back, and they're even now considering to start buying maybe some rice, which we've had an issue with that with South Korea, but we're getting closer to having a deal where that they will buy some rice from us, and that's important to us. And Japan is the same way. Japan is also, and we're dealing with them right now when it comes to trade and a trade agreement with them, and we've got somewhat of a first agreement for parts of an agreement with Japan, and they're huge to us also. To put that all in perspective, Canada, Mexico, they're number 1 and number 2 with ag trade, and then you got Japan and China. With China and Japan, they flip back and forth from 3 and 4.
And the Chinese.
So those four large major trading partners for agriculture are the ones all we're dealing with.
Well, let's start with this hemisphere right away.
All right.
And the successor to NAFTA, still no action, and there are some indications that it may not come until next year. Congress being preoccupied with a certain other matter at the moment.
Yeah. Well, to put it all in perspective, is that USMCA is vital for us to get it passed for agriculture. And if you realize and think about it, last November the 30th of 2018, the United States, Mexico, and Canada signed the agreement, and we have not ratified it yet. And Mexico has already ratified it. Canada's waiting on us to ratify it. And so Congress has got to move forward. We've got to have Congress moving forward. We've got to get this agreement settled. We went into this from agriculture wanting to do no harm. And we pretty well, that's what we've gotten. We aren't really doing any harm to agriculture in the agreements we already had. And we did have some pluses, a little bit in dairy and some other smaller pluses in there. But we need to keep it going, and we need Congress to get this deal done.
Where would you fix responsibility for that?
Well,
failure to get it done.
Well, I think that we've got two parties that are battling against each other, and I'm just going to be real honest with you. We need statesmen instead of politicians. We need people in Congress And I'm going to brag on our whole delegation. I'm telling you, they are all on top of it, and they are concerned about agriculture in Arkansas, but not just agriculture. All of Arkansas and all of our congressional delegation, our 2 senators and all, they do a great job, and they really support us well. I wished a lot of the other states had the kind of people in those positions as we do in Arkansas, so that we could get this deal done. But we're battling between parties, and we need to be looking at the issue that we're dealing with, no matter what it is, and this trade issue is a big one. We need to be looking at it and making the decision on the pros and cons of that trade deal, and it's a good deal for us. So that leaves no reason not to pass it.
Well, some members of the delegation have expressed at least a bit of what they would term understanding from Mr. Trump, President Trump's position in the tariff situation. Are they doing such a good job?
Well,
is that as supportive as you would like them to be?
Well, we've taken a pretty big lick, and we'll just get into China. We've taken a pretty good lick on the tariff situation and the tariff war with China. Agriculture's taken a big lick. We've gotten some market facilitation programs, to come in and fill in, and we've had 3 payments. There's 1 more left, and I think that everybody's saying pretty positive that we'll probably get that payment as well. But it's not enough, because we've lost a pretty good amount in the markets. We've got some of the lowest prices that we've had in a long time, and we've also are below break-even prices on some of those commodities. Now, China has begun to pick up some. We've seen some sizable amounts of soybeans being bought by China, and pork. Those 2, they're into those quite a bit. We've also are pretty close and going to see, and China has announced, so that's pretty good tell right there, that they're going to start buying a lot more poultry products from us. Now, the biggest market that we have when it comes to poultry in China is the paws, the feet. And so they have bought in the past around $300 million worth of those paws. And so and in the last 2-3 years, we've only sold them 1.3 million. Can you see the big difference there? And this poultry products that they're planning on buying could amount to about $1 billion.
Well, there's still, though, it would appear, a lack of clarity in the situation with China.
Yes, I agree completely.
How do you move that?
Yeah, and I don't know how we move that. Both sides wants to have a win. Now, how do you do that? Well, we think that when they agree and we put all this together to bed, and we're have an agreement there with China that we can all live with, then everybody wins. So let's get on and get that done. It kind of reminds me of what Ambassador Dodd said to us. We had our Foreign Policy Summit, and he came and spoke there. Now, he's from USTR. He's a U.S. Trade Representative, but he's one of the main negotiators when it comes to China. Ambassador Dodd is, and we've talked to him several times. And he made the analogy back in April of this year. He says, well, it's like you're bass fishing, okay? And you get a big bass on your line. You got a big bass fish on your line, all right? And it's just out there circling the boat. Just got the line on him, he's on them, and he's circling the boat, all right? Well, in May, all you got to do now is get him in the boat. It's all there, it's ready, get him in the boat, right? Well, in May, the line broke. He said this in April. In May, the line broke, and the fish is gone. Now, we got to get that fish back and in the boat.
Well, in the meantime, you're kind of settling for brim, are you not?
Yeah, we are. That's exactly right. We don't have a big bass we can mount on the wall anymore on the line. We're just getting the brim every once in a while.
Well, so much we can talk about. I want to get this in, too.
Right.
As we tape this broadcast, United Nations issued a new report on climate change, portraying the trend is much more dire, and our lack of progress in terms of coping with it much less advanced than we had hoped it would be. Climate change does have some profound implications for agriculture globally. And you've had a bad year in terms of what you had a lot more water at all the wrong times of year. Your members have. Yeah. Is there any kind of consensus among your members on how to,
I think that
what role it can play, the Farm Bureau?
I think that we make a lot about a lot of this with the climate change. The climate has changed forever since God put the earth here. It's always been ever changing. And I think we make too much a big deal of that. I've been to Copenhagen to recently with the North American EU Ag Conference / trade. And that was one of the biggest topics talked about was climate change, sustainable agriculture. And so what we see is, and I'll give you my definition of sustainable agriculture, if we're not profitable, we're not sustainable. Agriculture has to be profitable. And we've talked about how big engine it is for economic engine it is and for this state and for this nation. Well, if we can't make a profit, then we're not going to be here. We're not sustainable. And agriculture is the backbone of the economy of this whole nation. And it's pretty much the same in a lot of other countries. You can see how much importance China puts on it, right? And they can't feed their people. So we're there. But yeah, there's a lot of talk about that going on about the environment and climate change. So I think that we have to have sound minds and reasonable when you deal with those kind of things. Yeah, farmers and ranchers, they don't want to hurt the environment. That's where we make our living. We raise the crops, we raise our animals and feed them and all, and we all do it with water, land, and air.
I wish we could, Mr. President, I wish we could continue, but the clock's caught up with us. Randy Veach, thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
And come back.
I always enjoyed being with you. We appreciate you.
We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.